Well, welcome back everyone to Time to Shine. My name is Adrian, also known as Northern Star on Twitter, and I'm not joined alone. My faithful friend Mike is here with me. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Adrian. Hello, everybody. It is Mike, otherwise known as the Buried Truck on Twitter and various social media platforms. Back again, once again, for more Time to Shine.
Yes, just when you thought we were gone, we're back again. So now, just to explain to our listeners a little bit about our plan for our first few episodes. So what Mike and I are doing, or we're kind of giving you a taste of the entire series. Last time we focused on season 1. This time we're going to do season 2, and we've each selected one of our favorite episodes to review. And we just thought it would be a nice way to kind of introduce you guys to our podcast and see kind of how we do things. So, yeah, we're diving into season 2, and I don't know about you, Mike, but I always say it's hard with Shining Time. I'm like, this is my favorite. But season 2, I feel, is where the show really hit its stride. I feel like it just really balanced some of the more quiet gentleness of season 1 with some of the maybe busier plot lines, more complex kind of station antics, that kind of thing. What are your impressions of the season?
I definitely agree with you there. They definitely started having more fun, I feel like, with season 2. Not just with the main cast dynamics, but season 2, they definitely have more side characters when compared to season 1. You've got your more recurring characters like Midge Smoot, Ginny, Felix, J.B. King, Mayor Flopdinger. I would argue that they're as important as the mains who you're seeing every episode because they just add so much to it. And of course, we can't go without mentioning that one of the big changes in season 2 is the switch from Ringo Starr to George Carlin as Mr. Conductor, who, as much as I love Ringo, and I dearly love his season 1 Mr. Conductor, the dry humor of it all, George is always going to be the Mr. Conductor for me, without a doubt.
Yeah, he is wonderful. I love the whimsy and just the genuine kind of playfulness that he brings to the role. I feel like he took it to, I mean, it's a different, I would say it's just a different characterization from Ringo. George's feels just a little more lighthearted, a little almost more childlike, I would say. And I really love him. He was my first introduction to Mr. C, but I don't think I could choose. I have equal parts love for Ringo and George because they just have so their own style, and I do love the kind of dryness of Ringo, and he's definitely more understated.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you can't downplay the dryness of Ringo and how, it's funny because looking back on it, I feel like they tried to make Ringo's Mr. Conductor a little bit more of an adult figure, whereas when George comes along, and I think he's even said this in an interview in the past, but his Mr. Conductor was more the balance between the adults and the kids, not just strictly, an adult figure or an authority figure for the kids. They definitely mixed it in. You can see a lot more playfulness in George's Mr. Conductor, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting. Britt has gone on record a few times as saying that, George's, well, not George's specifically, but I agree with you. I think more so George's Mr. Conductor straddles both worlds in that he is an adult, but he's small like a child. So he has those kind of two components to him. So he's accessible to kids, but he also has some authority and some like, are you sure you want to do that? Or maybe you should think about this as well. Side to him. I also love what you said about the supporting characters because they help make the town of Shining Time feel real, just in their comings and goings and their quirkiness. I always love Midge and Ginny and her wild sayings. And we also, of course,
absolutely.
Yeah, we also get Billy coming in instead of Harry as well. So that's another big shift. Really great to have an Indigenous character on the show, especially in the 90s. And I know probably part of that is due to Rick's own background, his heritage. But I just think that was a really wonderful choice in terms of casting. And Tom Jackson.
I said it last episode too, but the thing is, I don't know about other kids watching the show, but I wanted to be Billy Two Feathers. I wanted to be the cool engineer at the train station when I was a kid, so he definitely had a big impact.
I love when you made that post about his wardrobe, and you're like Billy had the drip. I wanted kind of Billy's style.
I still do.
We were gonna sing for you last time. Next time we're gonna dress up for you.
Watch out! Next Thomas fan meetup, I'm coming in full Billy Two Feathers.
Billy Two Feathers cosplay, courtesy of the Berry Truck. It is going to be incredible. So season 2, lots of fun. Season 2, the other big change, we moved production from New York to Toronto. First for the Christmas special in 1990, and then for season 2 in 91. So we see a lot more Canadian cast members joining as some of the supporting cast and as some of the kids. So Kara, played by Erica Luttrell, and Dan, played by Ari Magder, both Canadian actors, as well as several others. The fellow who played Barton Winslow, Gerard Parks.
Gerard Parks.
Yeah, Canadian as well, I believe. He was in a Muppet movie, I remember, too. Yeah, so that's another big change.
He was in Fraggle Rock. He was Doc.
Yes, I never saw Fraggle Rock, sadly. So,
and this is such a good show.
I know. Well, and he was in, what I saw him in a few years ago was that Muppet Christmas movie, not the Christmas Carol, but a different one where they're all like at the house. He was in that.
He was, you know what? It's a bit of a side tangent, but that is one of my favorite Christmas movies ever. It gets a yearly watch from me. Every time I see it, obviously now with having reintroduced myself to Shining Time, every time it pops up on TV, I'm like, oh my god, it's Barton Winslow!
I love it. You know what? I didn't even know he was in that, and then I was watching that movie with my mom a couple Christmases ago, which I loved, by the way, and then I saw him, and I was like, oh my god.
Yes.
Yeah, there are some random. As we get further into season 3, there was the fellow who plays Hobart Hume. He was on an episode of Goosebumps, and that freaked me out because I rewatched Goosebumps recently and saw him and was like, "What, Hobart? What are you doing there?" Anyway, many tangents that we could get onto, but I feel like we should kind of loop back in. And the first episode we're going to review is a choice of Mike's called "Do I Hear?" and this is the 18th episode of Series 2.
Yes, indeed. So, to give a brief rundown of this episode, basically, what's happening here is that Billy and Stacy are going to a meeting at J.B. King's office in Snarleyville. Therefore, the kids have to leave the station early, which they are none too pleased about. So they decide to concoct a little plan to sneak back in after Billy and Stacy have gone. And who should be there with them? Of course, Schemer, the lovable Schemer. And he has discovered that someone has put a slug, which is a phony nickel, inside one of his machines. And thinking that he's getting one over on our favorite little jukebox puppet band, Schemer decides that he's going to use that slug to get a free song. The jukebox band obviously sees right through it and decides to start acting up, which means Schemer has to call a repairman.
Schemer, you okay?
It's a slug!
The repairman shows up, fixes the jukebox, and by fix we mean he just tells them that they've got to get back to work. And then to pay for the outrageous bill of, what was it, Adrian? $11.89, I believe, was the total quoted?
Yes.
I think that's what it was, yes. So, as Schemer says, nobody's got $11.89.
I think it's 85 cents.
So, is it 85?
I think it's $1.85.
Either way.
Close enough.
Yeah, either way, it's less than $12, which nobody has that kind of money, especially not in the 90s when this was being recorded.
Absolutely.
So Schemer has the brilliant idea, thanks to the kids, to have an auction right there in Shining Time Station. But here's the catch. He is selling other people's possessions. As we see, he tries to sell Billy's flute and even Mr. Conductor's whistle. Thankfully, the kids stop this in time, and with a little help from our handy little repairman, they stop the auction in time for Billy and Stacy to get back, and of course, give Schemer some good old discipline about why what he did is wrong.
Absolutely. Now, Mike, why did you choose this as one of your favorite episodes of season 2?
Well, I'm not gonna lie, and you saw right through it as soon as I told you that this was why I wanted to pick this episode, but the Thomas stories are a huge thing for me. The Thomas stories featured in this episode are Mavis and Toby's Tightrope, which of course, both season 3 episodes, the main episode starring, of course, Mavis, the diesel shunter. She is one of my favorites. Those two stories are absolutely some of my favorites of the entire series. But beyond that, I also think that the dynamic of Schemer and the kids alone in the station is so fun to explore. When there's no authority figure there, you know, as we see in the episode, even Mr. Conductor is sort of powerless to Schemer being around. So, you know, it's fun to explore that dynamic where...
I mean, Schemer's basically a man-child.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And to explore the dynamic without any authority figure there, it's really fun. And of course, you know, the Elvis repairman is a hoot and a half. So that's the reason I wanted to go with this one.
That's great. It is an interesting and unique episode. Funnily enough, that was one of the first things that I wrote down when I was taking my notes for today. It's so cool. I think it was so cool for me as a kid to watch the kids in the station without the adults. I mean, again, we can't really count Schemer as an adult. They just have free reign, and as a kid, I think we all kind of want that at some point. Like, oh, like rules of our parents. I wish they just disappear and we could just, you know, do whatever we wanted. So that's I think the show capturing kids' fantasies quite well, especially when they don't get what they want at the beginning. They're like, we don't get why we have to go away. Why can't we just stay in the station? Yeah. So it's a fun one for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's every kid wanted that moment of, you know, wanting to be home alone, not having the parents around, and then having no idea what to do when something inevitably goes wrong, as it does in this situation too. So it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you too on the Thomas stories. I remember this episode for those stories, I think, more than anything. Well, not more than anything, but definitely it stood out because the Mavis stories were new to me when I was watching season 2. So do you have any particular memories of this episode growing up? Or anything that stood out?
I never actually saw this episode growing up.
What? Another one?
Another one. I know. There's so much I missed when I was a kid. I don't know if it's when I came into watching Shining Time, because obviously, you know, I was born in 1992, after Series 2 had ended, and then my first real memories of the show were obviously of seeing Season 3, which was, you know, kind of new at the time. So I don't know if it's just because maybe the Season 2 stuff wasn't in syndication as much because they were trying to push the new season.
Probably.
But I never saw this one when I was a kid. It wasn't until, you know, a couple of years back that I realized, like, wait a minute, what episode were the Mavis stories from? Like, I don't remember that at all. And I have to wonder, I mean, in looking up info on this episode aired on Christmas Day of 1991.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I have to wonder... you have to wonder, like, did they not repeat it as much because the view count wasn't as high, not factoring in that it was Christmas Day and people were probably spending time with their families, maybe?
It's a very interesting theory. I mean, the only thing that is Christmassy is, like, the snow in the second episode. It's a good point. It is an odd choice. I mean, why wouldn't they skip or re-air the Christmas special again? You know, on that day in lieu of a new Shining Time episode is an odd choice. I completely agree. But I do think it's nice to have the two Thomas stories packaged together in one episode. I like that as a kid, and I think on some VHSs they're often separate, but they just flow so well together.
Exactly. I mean, I've often made the case that, you know, it's hard for me to pick one over the other because they've just always gone together as a pair for me. You can't really have Mavis without Toby's Tightrope and vice versa. So
inextricably linked.
I always liked when exactly. I always liked when they would have, you know, the running theme between the Thomas episodes in the same Shining Time storyline as well. So that's a big thing for me too. So do you have any big memories of this one growing up? Do you remember seeing it at all?
I do recall the kids being in the station. I recall certain things, some that I'll get into a bit later. I think one thing, rewatching it yesterday, I really noticed that as a kid I didn't get the Elvis reference. Oddly, it never landed with me. I didn't know that. I didn't get the sort of his like Elvis accent and his king repairman and all the the Elvis lyrics that he just that are peppered into his dialogue. But as an adult, I remember, like, now I really enjoy, especially just his just over the top kind of character and schemer not getting it and just being like, that guy reminds me of somebody.
Listen, there's a possibility that this one might be haunted.
You have a suspicious mind, sir. I'm sure it's not that. It's probably just all shook up.
Yeah, well, anyway, listen, the clock's ticking, so let's get to work, pal, huh?
It's just because Brian plays it really well.
Absolutely. And you know what? You make a good point, Adrian, because I think, obviously, watching this as an adult, I get the reference. I know that it's Elvis. I know when they're referencing the songs. I don't think I would have got it as a kid either, but I know that my parents would have, which I think is what they were obviously factoring in, that, you know, this is a quality family show. Yep. Obviously, kids are going to be watching it with their parents sometimes, so you've got to sprinkle in those little bits that are going to make the parents chuckle and keep them interested too.
I really agree, and I love that it did that, because I think all good children's programming does serve both so that it can be a family show. And
yes,
I think it did it. I think it did it well here. One kind of interesting tidbit that I read in an interview with Rick Sigelko was when he was writing the script for this episode. We mentioned last time how Dr. Ron Slaby was a series advisor, so they'd run the first draft. The usually just a summary of the episode in the first draft by him to make sure there were no glaring issues when it came to the kind of especially the kids' psychology side of things. And Rick was really concerned about having an Elvis repairman because he thought that kids, like, it was not okay to have somebody portraying Elvis even though Elvis is dead. Like, he thought that would somehow confuse children or not be appropriate. And it was really funny because he asked Ron, and Ron's like, that's fine. Like, it's just a total non-issue. But Rick was like really worried about, like, what are kids gonna think? Which I think is kind of sweet, because it's like, whatever, you know. To me as a kid, I know you didn't see it as a kid, but to me, I was like, oh, it's just some kind of like weird repairman who seems kind of omnipotent in some way. But I did enjoy Stacy's reaction to Schemer when she gets back to the station. Schemer! And she gives him that little tap, which probably wouldn't get away with now. But she's like,
absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And when she was like, trying to sell other people's things, how could you do such a thing? And he's like, well, I just got the box and she's like, oh, Schemer. I love that he just starts explaining to her. And Miss Jones. And it was just I find their, even when they're angry at each other, it's so funny. Oh, yeah.
It's so fun. And you gotta love Stacy's little, oh, Mr. Genius time. Yeah. Did you read the bill? Like,
yeah. It says $1.85. And then Billy's like, you were so busy expecting to get tricked, you tricked yourself. Which is just, it was great, because in that moment they don't even have to say much. He just sort of sits left with that.
Oh, exactly. And you know what? In talking about Billy, the thing that I kind of realized on rewatching these episodes that we're going to discuss today, Tom Jackson is just such a talented person, not only with acting, but he's also, he's had a long music career, and, he's done so many great things for, various communities. And one thing that struck me about him playing Billy Two Feathers is it feels like a very, I don't know if I'm going to be even choosing the right words here, but it feels so natural. It doesn't feel like he's putting on a character. It feels like he's just being himself, but he's going under a different name. Like it always felt like this was, it wasn't like he was playing anything up for the camera. He wasn't having to do any exaggerated character traits or anything like that. It's a very relaxed and easy delivery, and it just made it feel more impactful, I guess, in a way, because you feel like you're watching a real person.
Yeah, that's well said. I think it just was a very naturally portrayed character for him. You're right, very like quite understated, and there were moments where he gets a bit playful and whatnot, but that's kind of about it. He really, yeah, and I like that. I like that he's sort of this grounding force, and that it does feel quite authentic. And I got the impression too that he had a good time doing the show, because I know, like you said, he was busy. He's still busy. I was trying to get him on my second podcast, and he was too busy to record a message for it, because he's just had such a prolific career. But it's neat that he was on this show. I think as a Canadian actor and as an Indigenous actor too, he's done so much, like you said, for various communities and for Indigenous rights. Yeah. So I know he posted on Twitter. He's posted 1 or 2 photos from the show and said like, "Oh, good times, happy memories," which is kind of sweet.
Yes. Yeah. Of course.
Now, to get into the nitty gritty of the episode, what do you think of the song in the Picture Machine?
I have a little brother, he's a pretty good friend. I have a lot of fun when I play with him, but it makes me mad and it breaks my heart when he goes and breaks my things apart. Oh, it's a worry when I get to my room at the end of the day and my toys are scattered every which way. So I try to tell him and I try to explain, but he just goes and does it again. Now tell me, why does he have to lose them? I hear my toys calling, break them or abuse them. I hear my toys falling, why does he have to use them at all? And will he get better when he grows up? Oh, I have a little brother and
I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't really like the song in the Picture Machine. I can't quite pinpoint it, but I think it's just the fact that I don't know, it feels almost too kiddie or childish, I guess. I never really got that vibe from other things in the Picture Machine before, or other songs or anything in the Anything Tunnel even. Like, it just, something about it strikes me as really preschooler, and everything before that was Shining Time. It felt more universal. It didn't feel like it was just honed in on one specific age range. So, it doesn't really do it for me personally, but for others, it might be good. We should add, by the way, the song we're referring to. It's titled "Better When He Grows Up," and that was written and sung by Beverly Glenn Copeland.
Yes, who is a very talented musician, and really, according to Rick, experiencing a huge resurgence in her career right now.
Yes.
But I agree, I am not a fan of that song. I'm not a fan of those types of segments where it does get really kiddie. There's another one in season 3, I think in Scheme or Alone, with the babies, and
yeah,
it just gets weird. It gets a bit too weird for me. So, but funnily enough, what it was for me in not liking this as a kid is I would cringe seeing this kid destroy all his brother's toys, especially when he was pulling out the tape from the old cassette. Like, there's something, I've always had a really hard time with people destroying other people's things just for the sake of destroying them. And so as a kid, I hated this segment because I just thought that child was such a devil. Yeah. And then at the end, you just see them like, he just wreaks havoc on all his brother's stuff. You see no reaction to his brother, and then his brother's like out flying a kite and he's grown up into a different child actor. And they're having all this fun together. I'm like, that kid was evil. Like he broke his brother's pencil crayons in half. He's the sadistic child. Anyway, that's just sorry, I'm a bit carried away, but I was not a fan. The ending was sweet, and I do like the song itself. The song isn't bad, but I just don't like the music video.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. It's not my favorite of the Picture Machine offerings throughout the series, but that's all right. They can't all be winners.
That's absolutely right. The Mavis stories make up for it because they are just delicious. And especially with George's narration.
Unquestionably. Yes.
Are there anything about those episodes that, I know Mavis is a favorite of yours. Is there anything more that you'd like to say about the Thomas stories or their choice for this episode?
Yeah, I think that definitely the choice of Mavis plays into, the moral of, when someone tells you to do something, especially if it's someone who's older, you can't discount what they're saying. They might know what they're talking about, which, we see Mavis experience that when Toby tries to tell her a certain way of going about pulling the trucks, and she does not listen and ends up in a whole bunch of trouble. But I really love these stories. It's one of those things where I can't really explain why, other than, obviously Mavis being a favorite of mine. But it's just, there's something so special about them. Maybe it's because it's season 3 of Thomas, which I can't think of season 3 of Thomas without thinking of seasons 2 and 3 of Shining Time, and vice versa. They're so intrinsically linked to me that it's just, as soon as I see a Thomas episode from season 3, my mind immediately goes like, oh, I remember when I saw this on Shining Time Station too. It's just, there's something so special about it. But I think the interesting thing too about Mavis, especially in light of recent information, is how they, in promotional material at least, they seem to really be pushing her as the prominent female engine character. Especially in light of what we learned about how Rick Sigelkow did not want Daisy present in Shining Time Station at all. Rightfully so. I can understand it based on, the choices that David Mitton and crew made with the makeup and such. But it's interesting that, right on the heels of season 2, the next series introduces Mavis, and for all the promotional material and the press releases about how she was this prominent female character, when you break it down, she's only in really 2 episodes of the whole series 3. So it just always struck me as odd, especially with how they split series 3's filming up. You would think that if they wanted to have her more present and have more female representation, maybe she would have been more present in those last 10 stories, or they would have given her more screen time. But oddly enough, it doesn't happen.
Or that they would have picked a Brenner magazine story, because they did that a fair bit without crediting him in series 3. Why wouldn't they do that with that demand? Because we know that they were getting a lot of flack at that point, or Brit was by 91, from people saying that Thomas was a male-dominated show, which it is. I mean, it was written a long time ago. But you're right.
Yeah, let's not beat around the bush.
Yeah, well, come on. Yeah, it's. I mean, the female characters are very typecast, and play very minimal roles. But that's hard when you're working within this sort of canon of stories, and you're trying to remain as faithful to them as possible, then trying to update them and pick and choose. Right. I always loved these Mavis stories. I think they're very unique, and I think they're just well constructed. I like the music and her theme. I like the pacing and the diversity of the stories, because they're very different, the first one and the second one.
Yes.
And I enjoy this. You know what I really enjoy is the start of the second episode, how Percy comes to the quarry and finds Mavis. It just is a really nice introduction. It's so different from the first story, and it loops another engine back into the world of sort of the quarry life and Mavis's struggles that she's going through. And I think for that reason, I think they're very well constructed, well filmed, and well executed stories in general.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. They're some of the most, in terms of story construction, it's very nice how you have a pair of episodes where the first one is a little bit more laid back. There's not as much action per se, but there's still something interesting that happens to drive the story.
And a different kind of action.
The second story is
more
where
like
you
low-key.
really get the action.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a different kind of action.
Yeah.
And of course, it just visually some of the best looking episodes of the series up to that point. And even today, like, it's still so fun to see the snow-covered quarry, and the bridge destruction scene in Toby's Tightrope will always be a favorite of mine, for sure.
It's so dramatic. Also, another one that struck me as a kid was that image of when Mavis is stuck and they're trying to thaw the tracks with the coals, and there's that shot of the hot coals on the tracks steaming up in front of this like laughing truck's face. It's just there's something very like sort of ominous, but also like just almost a little spooky about it. And then coupled with the breakdown train music, two, I think, really solid stories.
An angry farmer was telling Mavis just what she could do with her train.
And then we get the riddle song as our jukebox band song, kind of toward the end of the episode. What do you think of that one?
I really think it's one of my favorite jukebox songs of the entire series. It's just so beautifully done. It's a very slow song. It's a very soft song, but you get such a beautiful combination of voices because you've got Vanessa Thompson, who of course is Grace the bass, and then we also have, funnily enough, on the day of this recording, yesterday would have been the birthday of Alan Seamock, who was the voice of was he Tex or Rex?
Testing me now.
I want to say Tex.
I think he was Tex, but the singing voice was Rory Dodd, who sang on Total Eclipse of the Heart with Bonnie Tyler.
Right. Yeah.
And their voices together are beautiful in this, like Venice and Rory.
Yes, they complement each other so well. And I love how they trade off the verses and then eventually come back together at the very end for the sort of climax of the song. It's just so wonderfully done.
And that final harmony when they're singing "No Crying,"
yes,
it's very beautifully done.
A cherry when it's blooming, it has no stone. A chicken when it's piping, it has no bone. The story that I love you, it has no end. A baby when it's sleeping has no
Thank you very much, guys.
It's interesting. I have a lot of fondness for that song now because I only recently really discovered it again as an adult, and then, like I was saying, recorded it onto my iTunes so I could listen to it. It's a very touching song. I find it's sort of a beautiful love song, lullaby kind of quality to it. But as a kid, I think I often, to be honest, fast forwarded it, which I'm ashamed to admit. But as a kid, slower songs, I'd get bored. It's weird. But I didn't have the same appreciation, but as I've gotten older, I love them. Love, love, love.
Yeah, I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, as a kid, it was always more exciting when the jukebox band was doing like the upbeat rock and roll kind of stuff, or like the faster country stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Like Mama Don't Allow or something.
Oh yes, it's such a good performance. It's so good. But as you get older, you start to appreciate the other ones, like, obviously this one, but also I think of one of the first things that comes to my mind when I think of the jukebox band is when they do Cumberland Gap in Washout. Again, very slow song, very mellow, but it's just so beautifully performed. And, when people, we were discussing this a little bit earlier, but when people kind of skim through Shining Time episodes just to kind of get to the Thomas stories, they miss out on a lot of these really beautiful performances that the jukebox puppets did. And, if for anyone who is curious about Shining Time, I can't stress it enough. Don't skip your way through, because you're going to miss out on some really good gems in there.
Absolutely. And also, I really appreciate that they're not just kiddie songs. It's not like Wheels on the Bus. Like, these are beautiful folk songs. A lot of them are very adult themed. We have Waltzing Matilda in another episode. Yeah. They're dealing with really intense themes of death and sadness, but they're done in a way that is, I think, kid accessible. And again, it's not dumbing it down. And you're hearing these beautiful folk songs that are quite carefully written and composed and very well sung. So I agree. And also,
I agree. They do a very good job of making these, in some cases, songs that we have known. They do, I think in one of the family specials, they do This Land Is Your Land.
Yes.
Very familiar songs. And so they put a great spin on it, though, because I've gone back and I've listened to some of the, like, original folk recordings of these songs. very different from what you hear the Jukebox Band doing, but they refreshed it in a way that it keeps these songs alive and it presents them to a new generation. And I just think that's such an awesome thing. And the fact that they were able to pull it off with such talented people is really a credit to the show.
Absolutely. And it's a credit to Steve Horlick as well, who did the musical arrangements on the show. And hopefully Joseph and him are successful in releasing the masters, so we get those songs in good quality. Because, I mean, we have them in better quality now with Joseph's uploads, but they're just, they're so beautiful. Just on the note of the jukebox, before we kind of move on, we also get to see the jukebox from the rear for the first time.
Yes.
Which is incredibly unique.
It's, I mean, the thing that really strikes me, obviously, this is the first time that we've seen another human take note of, they actually see the Jukebox Band for themselves. As we see in the episode, the Elvis repairman, who, just to give some credit, played by George Thomas, he sees the band, and the thing that I find interesting is that he kind of shushes them as they're freaking out that he's looking in on their little stage there, and he says, "It's okay, I won't tell anybody, but you got to get back to work." And it makes me think, like, does this repairman, is this a common phenomenon? Does he often go into jukeboxes and find little puppet bands that are waiting to play the song? Because he's not freaked out. He's really not.
Get it done. Whoa, 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 whoa.
You can trust me. I won't tell. But you better get back to work now.
I know. That's such a great question. It's just so charming. That thought, sorry, Mike, the whole thought of that is so charming. That he's like, oh,
I know, like a
band.
specific repairman who deals in jukeboxes that are housed by specifically little puppet bands that do live performances.
I love that he's complicit in keeping their secret. It's so sweet. How scared they are of him. And it is neat to see somebody like take off the door, the fake door of the back of the jukebox. And I mean, in real life, it was just an empty prop. There would have just been a few lights on the inside. So that's what he's really looking at. But I also thought it was neat how they, sort of switched the jukebox interior set around and then did that beautiful lighting effect of the front grille of the jukebox onto that sort of mesh on the front. It just looks, it really sold the look, I think, of them being right behind there, playing their little song. I have one more note on the Elvis guy. I don't know how many folks are aware. It depends if you've read the interview. I think it's on the SIF website, but Rick was saying that the first take that this fellow did of his Elvis impression had everyone in stitches, but it was too over the top. So he had to ask him to sort of like rein it in a little bit. So that it was like a little more subtle. So we're seeing the subtle version of Elvis, which is still quite, direct, I'm all sugar.
Yeah, it's very suave and very, very laid back in terms of how you would normally see someone do Elvis, because a lot of people would obviously, it would be over the top, and I think it works as a more laid back performance for Shining Time in particular.
I think so too. He's almost like, dare I say, a little bit sexy. Like there's a little bit like in his outfit and his swagger. Like he just has a bit of, like, he's got, as Austin Powers would say, he's like got mojo. I think this Elvis guy.
Yeah.
And he's wearing like a gold repairman jacket. Like this dude's got style. And I also love that he can't afford blue suede shoes. So we get Schemer. Schemer can't afford $1.85 bill, but he can afford to give away a brand new pair of blue suede shoes. It's so ludicrous.
You can't put a price on looking good, Adrian. That's the way it goes.
Well, and we also know, because he said his mommy got them for him. So
True. Now, this also begs another interesting question, though, because do we have any confirmation of when Shining Time Station actually takes place? Because you have to think, did Schemer giving the repairman the blue suede shoes kickstart his music career as Elvis?
Genius.
Do we have Schemer to thank for the musical phenomena that is Elvis Presley?
Yes.
I like to think we do. It's a great reality.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point because Shining Time, you can never really pin down the era of it. Like, it seems new sometimes, but mostly old, especially with the way Schemer is obsessed with nickels. Because they would have had to be, like, quite a while ago. But then their dress, I think it's kind of a hodgepodge. But I think you're onto something, Mike. I think we've got a really solid theory there for all the Elvis fans out there. It was Horace Schemer.
Well, now you've just got me thinking, if they made Shining Time Station in today's era, would Schemer be obsessed with Bitcoin or NFTs or something like that?
Oh, God, he probably would. That is... This is not an encouragement for somebody
You can't put that in your money belt, unfortunately, so that would ruin that appeal.
This is not encouragement for somebody to write an NFT episode about Schemer. Just a disclaimer, as somebody who just, oh my God, I can't stand it. But...
please, not all my ideas are good. Please don't do that.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Yes. So now, do you have any final thoughts on that episode before we move on, Mike?
Well, it's just one of those things where it was such a pleasant surprise to stumble upon this episode as an adult. I'm sure if I had watched it as a kid, probably would have been one of my favorites. But discovering it nowadays, there's just so many more things that I appreciate, from the Elvis reference to the choice in the Thomas stories, and of course, the beautiful jukebox song at the end. I don't know if I would have appreciated it as much if I had seen this as a kid. So yeah, coming into it with an adult perspective, I really love this episode. I think it's one of the more underrated Shining Time episodes.
Totally. And I love when Elvis says, "Thanks, guys. Thanks for that, guys," at the end of the song, because they play that as a thank you to him. What would you rate this, Mike, out of 10?
I'm going to have to give it a 9. Honestly, the only thing that doesn't do it for me, as we discussed previously, is the song in the picture machine. Everything else about this episode is wonderful to me. Obviously, as we discussed, we've got the Thomas stories, we've got the jukebox song. Schemer's interaction with the kids is wonderful. Especially, when you get to the auction scene and he doesn't quite know how auctions work, so he's trying to sell it for less and less and only realizes a mistake afterwards. Just some great comedic moments from Brian here.
I know. Only Schemer would do it in reverse. 5, do I hear 5, 4, 3, 2 cents? Oh, it's just...
Let's have the bidding begin at 10 cents. 10 cents. Do I hear 9 cents?
9 cents.
9 cents. Do I hear 8 cents?
8 cents? I just bid 9 cents.
Exactly. Do I hear 7 cents? 7 cents. Do I hear 6? 6. Do I hear 5? 4, 3, 2 cents sold to the guy.
And then you see the moment afterwards, like,
and you even
and he realizes his mistake.
Yeah, you even have the passenger who's like, 8 cents? I just bid 9 cents.
I know. And actually, interesting, that passenger features several times in the show. She's in, I think, 3 or 4 episodes. That particular passenger, and I love her voice and her, her style. So you give it a 9. Lovely.
I would give it a 9. Yeah, I think it's a very solid episode. I would recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it or who wants to revisit Shining Time. Definitely recommend it for me. What about you? What do you rate it, Adrian?
Well, just before I rate it, I was going to say, if the Picture Machine song had had a different music video, do you think you would have liked it a bit more? Because my sense for me is yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if there was a different Picture Machine song, I'd probably give it a 10.
Okay, or like a different, or even just like a different music video that's shot like that, even as the same song, but just a better music video.
No, I think it would have to be a different song. I'm not a big fan of the song itself, but if they had changed that up, I think we would have had a pretty flawless episode of Shining Time on our hands.
Well, I'm not far behind you in terms of my rating, Mike. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I enjoy the kids being on their own at the station, like I said before. I love the Mavis stories. Mr. C sort of being almost taken advantage of by Schemer. All his stuff is being auctioned off. We really get a sense of threat at the end, and then Billy and Stacy coming to the rescue. Schemer learning his lesson, well, at least for now. The reason I gave it 8.5 is something about I was just trying to articulate it earlier, and something about the pacing feels a little off for me, or it felt a little off for me as a kid. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's a very enjoyable episode overall. Really solid entry in the kind of season 2 catalog.
The following is a paid advertisement for Perez Pronto Bus Company.
Winter snow or summer sun, taking the bus is lots of fun.
When it's too hot to walk and riding your bicycle makes you break into a sweat, then why don't you take the easy way and go for a ride on the Perez Pronto bus? Every window opens on our bus, and most of the time, we're right on time. With trips to Fort Farley, Pelican Falls, Lucy's Leap, and, of course, Cloggyville, and all the places in between. Remember, there's only one Perez Pronto bus.
Perez Pronto.
Hi, I'm Mike O'Donnell, one of the composers of the original Thomas the Tank Engine theme, and I'm here to tell you that I have released a selection of re-recorded themes and songs from the classic shows in a series of albums called the Engine Themes. These albums include a variety of classic themes and songs from the original TV series, as well as a few new compositions. You can purchase these albums on CD or digital download, as well as posters and pin badges. Have a look online at modmusic.co.uk. And for a special offer for Right On Track listeners, you can use the special code ROT20 for a 20% discount on all digital downloads. Be sure to enter the code when making your purchase. Thank you for your support and happy listening. Take care and stay safe.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our next episode of Season 2. This was a favorite of mine. This is All's Fair, which is the lovely season finale. So the 20th episode of Series 2. And I'll give everyone just a summary for those who haven't seen it. So we see the start of the episode and the kids putting up a poster on the picture machine. Indian Valley County Fair starts today. So that's the sort of the plot of the episode. We have this fair, and we have Schemer and Stacy both kind of entering in their own way into the pie making contest. In Stacy's absence, we have the kids and Billy taking care of the station, and they make several blunders and worry that the station might be closed, because we get our lovely supporting actresses who play Midge Smoot and Ginny get kind of put out and miss a train and have to wait and end up taking Felix Perez's bus. And then we have, some lovely music in there. A Thomas story. We've got Edward Trevor and the Really Useful Party told by Mr. C. We get Billy reassuring the kids that the station wouldn't close, that it's okay to make mistakes. And we get a nice little appearance by J.B. King, who comes in looking for Mr. C and has a really beautiful sort of picture machine segment that tells a story of him as a young boy. And and then at the end, we get the kind of the really funny finale of the pie flinger whacking both Schemer and little Schemy in the face, and the mayor kind of coming in and judging the pie contest. It turns out Schemer and Schemy have stolen Stacy's baked pies and put whipped cream on them, and then they end up going on their faces. And from their faces, the mayor takes a lick, like a finger and then a lick, and says, "Inspired, you're the winner." So Stacy wins the contest. The marching band comes in. Everyone rejoices, and we get a really funny entrance and exit, with Schemer and Schemy wearing strawberry costumes, and everyone heading off to the fair. And then finally, Billy getting a moment of peace, and then Mr. C riding through his legs and saying, "So long until the next surprise," which to me was just such a beautiful way to sum up the vibe of Shining Time Station. And I always loved episodes where there's all this chaos, and then all of a sudden you get this lovely quiet and this calm station environment, and somebody just having a little reflection, and then a little music cue, and we're out. So I think a really fun finale. So do you have any kind of early memories of this, Mike? This episode?
Yeah, in stark contrast to the last episode, I do remember seeing this one as a kid. This one is very memorable, of course, as you mentioned. I mean, it's memorable enough for just Schemer and Schemy dressed as the strawberries alone. But it's just such a fun episode. A very stark contrast to the season finale of season 1, where you don't know if there's going to be a Shining Time station after J.B. King has had his final say. Whereas in this one, you constantly have Billy throughout the episode saying, oh no, Shining Time Station will be here for a very long time. So I appreciate that tonal shift and almost reassuring the kids, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. Even if you make mistakes, it's all good.
Yeah, the stakes are a little bit less, and you've got a sense that Billy is like, it's okay, this is not great, but we've got this. Shining Time Station will be here for as long as, and that whole speech that he does is so beautiful, just beautifully told. It really is. The music and the kids sort of looking at him entranced. Yeah, it's a great one. This, obviously, I chose this episode for a reason. It's a huge standout for me. Probably, it was similarly, I love the strawberry outfits bit. I think it's just peak comedy. I also love the beginning where Mr. C is again like, look what I won at the fair. I ate a whole baked bean, 2 entire French fries, and a bite and a half of apple pie. And again, the whole baked bean is just like a whole shrimp from our last episode, and sweet. And he's got his cotton candy and his little bear, and it was just like it was a fun episode, and also incredibly heartfelt. One of my favorite sort of pieces of the episode is the home picture machine segment and song featuring J.B. King essentially as a young boy, and his whole story with that. I'm still very kind of touched by that to this day. And just to share kind of a personal story with that, since I moved to Toronto, I'm living here now. I've been here for about 10 years. I've been determined to find the location where that was shot. And I did get in touch with Frank Vitale, who shot all the location music videos and segments. And he said, somewhere in the valley. I think it's around here and here. And I looked, literally I spent last winter kind of doing my walks and looking all around. Well, I found the place. It is in fact Toadmorden Mills, which is literally like a 5-minute walk from my house down the hill, not far from Evergreen Brickworks. And they shot it back there in the 90s. And at that time, there was a station there, and it was the Don Station, which is a historic station. It had been further south on the Don, just south of Queen Street. It had been moved up to Toadmorden Mills in 69, and kind of preserved there and been there for quite a while. Was there until 2008, at which time it was broken, taken apart into sections, moved to Roundhouse Park, and then restored fully. It was sort of not as utilized in Toadmorden Mills because there wasn't a station going through there. Anyway, of course, because the station wasn't there, I didn't think it was the same location until I did a reverse Google image search, found the station, looked up the whole story, and so I just had this whole thing. And I would go to that site at Toadmorden Mills when I was on my walks and reflect and feel like it was so much like the scene from that music video, like the grass and everything. And then I realized it is the very location, and now I finally mapped out what is what. So it has a very personal kind of connection to me. And the song, I love the lyrics. I love the idea of sort of a lost boy's story and then finding his way back to his parents. It makes me think of like J.B. King almost in his inner child or something. It's just like, I know Mr. Conductor is around here somewhere. Why is he so set on finding him and realizing that he's there? And then by the end, he remembers these forgotten lyrics of, and it's wonderful how all at once you're where you wished for all along, and realizes that he's meant to be at Shining Time Station. He's meant to be doing what he's doing. It's sort of this reaffirming. And then he thanks Mr. Conductor and kind of walks away. I cannot watch that seen without tearing up, truth be told. I'm an emotional guy, but yeah, I just have a very strong connection to that.
All the happiness with those you care for, when you finally know what you're there for, and it's wonderful how suddenly you're in the place where you belong. All the sharing that makes life worth living, and the pleasure you get 'cause you're giving, and it's wonderful how all at once you're where you wished for all along. I'm home.
Yes, that's it. That's the poem. And it's wonderful how all at once you're where you wished for all along. Yes, that's it. This is where I belong. It's always been here. Thank you for helping me remember, Mr. Conductor. Wherever you are.
And also the beginning is filmed at Union Station in Toronto, which is kind of cool.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say, when I was rewatching it, I was like, I recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that Picture Machine segment?
Well, I mean, as you said, Adrian, it's just such a beautiful overall. I mean, the music itself is beautiful. The music video has been shot wonderfully. I'm still, I remember when you posted about your discovery about the Dawn Station, and I believe they moved it to the Roundhouse Park, didn't they?
Yeah, in 2008.
Yeah. So for any Canadians, any non-Canadians who may be traveling here, if you're Toronto bound, then I can't recommend Roundhouse Park enough. It is a railway buff haven. You will find so many cool things there.
You could go inside the station and visit the gift shop, and also ride the train around the station.
You could reenact the boy coming out of the station in the home music video if you wanted. So there you go. Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because when I look at this whole scene with J.B. King, you know, in Shining Time Station before this episode and even after this episode, they always kind of play J.B. King looking for Mr. Conductor with more of a comedic tone. So it's, you know, in the grand scheme of things, especially if you're watching it sequentially, to finally get this episode where we get a very honest and very vulnerable explanation of why he wants to find Mr. Conductor, and why he's such an important figure to him, it really puts everything else in perspective. And I think it even adds a little bit more weight to the end of the season 1 finale, when just seeing Mr. Conductor's hat is enough to change his mind and make him say, you know what, we're going to keep Shining Time Station open.
Yeah, and you really get a sense of the magic, especially because, you know, George Carlin's Mr. C is there to put the nickel, you know, on top of the picture machine for J.B. King to find. So there's just something so sweet about, like, him reassuring him in that way and saying, like, no, the magic is here. You're where you're supposed to be. It's okay. I don't know why that. I think that moves me in a deep way, because I've always kind of believed in magic and things that, you know, oh, just because we can't explain it or just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not real. So I think it captures that theme really well. There was also another tidbit, interestingly, that song was composed by the same fellow who did the theme song, Joe Raposo, for the 1976 animated film Raggedy Ann, A Musical Adventure, which coincidentally featured Didi Conn as the voice of Raggedy Ann back in the day. So I don't know if Didi was aware of that connection. Yeah. I don't know if she was aware of that connection. I mean, she probably, I don't even know if she might have seen the episode. I don't know. She was pretty busy, but that's kind of a wild link there, hey?
That, you know what? It's funny because I didn't know that, obviously, but I can perfectly picture Didi Conn as the voice of Raggedy Ann. That's a very fitting voice.
I know, because she does have a childlike voice in a lot of ways. especially when she was younger. So I think that...
for sure.
I think that fits in it. It's interesting how they repurposed it for this story, but it was a very well written episode. Just credit to the writers.
And of course, I mean, it's very fitting for the motif of Shining Time and the production of how you think about the Picture Machine and how there's these old cartoons or these old folk songs that the jukebox are playing. It's things from the past that are being repurposed for a new generation, and that applies to even this song too. So yeah, it fits right in. It doesn't feel like it's out of place. It fits perfectly with the feel of the episode and the feel of Shining Time Station as a whole.
Totally. And then we get, after Billy's beautiful speech that we referenced earlier, we get the lovely jukebox song, which is The Railroad Cars Are Coming. And it's a lovely sort of following to what Billy is saying. There will always be trains and there will always be Shining Time Station. And then they go into this beautiful kind of railroad song. And with the accompanying clips of the train, it's always been a favorite. And I love the opening piano riff. It's like do 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 do. It's just with Tito playing on his little random kind of corner bent piano. And another well-sung song by Rory Dodd there.
Yes, that Billy sure knows his trains. Don't he, Tex?
Well, so do we, Rex.
Hey, you guys. We also happen to know a song about railroad cars.
Well then, this one's for Billy. Right on. Hit it.
The Great Pacific Railway for California hail. Bring on the locomotive, lay down the iron rail. Across the rolling prairies, by steam we're bound to go. The railroad cars are coming, humming through New Mexico. The railroad cars are coming, humming through New Mexico.
Yeah, this is another beautiful one from the Jukebox Puppet Band. This is another one that stands out to me for sure. It matches, I guess, in terms of the other songs we talked about and kind of what we were discussing in the last episode. It's a good balance between the sort of mellow feel and the softer, more soothing songs that the Jukebox Band would sing, but it also has its own little drive to it. It's got sort of a softer rock flair, and it feels very railroad-esque in the way that it kind of keeps driving forward, with the beat.
That's a really great way of characterizing that song. Absolutely, because it's got this gentle lull, but it's persistent, and it carries the song, and the song gets a little bit more upbeat, but it still doesn't lose that heart. Yeah, I completely agree. It looks like the writer was Ellis Wiener, who did writing for National Lampoon, I believe. But he did a lot of great writing for the series. He's a man of few words, as seen in one of his interviews. But he really, I think, was a great writer. I will say I'm not a fan of the Thomas story in this episode. I think I didn't mind it as a kid. I thought it was an okay story, but I don't like the title. The story feels a bit disjointed to me. It's what's dragging down my rating a little bit for this episode is that Thomas story personally, but I know other people maybe are a bit more divided on Edward, Trevor, and the Really Useful Party.
It's even a mouthful to get out.
I know. Like, what were they thinking? Edward? No, they should have just called it Edward, Trevor, Terrence, Bertie, and the Really Useful Party. They may as well just go for it.
Yeah. Just list every character. The vicar, Edward's driver,
Sir Topham Hatt.
Everyone makes mistakes, Becky. The trick is pulling together to correct them. Like the time with Edward, Trevor, Terrence, and Bertie. Well, let me start at the start and begin at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, it's funny too because in like the standalone, I remember when I was a kid, I got one of the standalone book releases of, you know, the book adaptation of this episode, and it's just called Edward and the Party. Even that would have been better.
You have to say the whole thing again. No, I'm just kidding.
That episode. That's how I'm going to refer to it from now on.
That would be better. Edward and the Garden Party, right?
Yeah. Or Trevor and the Party. However you want. Just condense it down a little bit.
It just always felt a bit like two separate stories for me. I don't know.
That's the thing. I agree with you there in that I'm a bit mixed on this episode because I do think it's pleasant. I do love more of the slice of life sort of stories, but especially in comparison to other Series 3 episodes where they've taken two stories and combined them, it doesn't feel like this one flows as well. It feels very much like, well, we've got one story and we've got another, and I guess we're just going to try and sandwich them together with no real good segue between them. And, you know, as much as I love the combination of characters, you know, Edward and Trevor, I always love seeing them together. Even Terrence shows up for a little bit, which is great. You know, again, it's just, it doesn't feel, I feel like they could have used a few more revisions to make everything flow a little bit more seamlessly. And, you know, of course, as most Thomas fans know, there was a deleted scene from this episode that surfaced in some books and magazines later, showing Diesel actually sort of antagonizing Edward and Trevor at the orchard. So you have to wonder, you know, what sort of role would he have played in this? Would that have dragged the story down more, or would it have improved things? You know, I'm curious.
It's an interesting question. I think it could have improved it because for me, the conflict of the garden party not having anyone going to it versus the conflict that happens at the garden party are so unrelated. So if somehow they had Diesel trying to maybe sabotage the party, or I don't know, some other thread that just was more on par with the main conflict in the story, it would flow. Whereas they just have Bertie coming in and being all speedy, and then he appears later and gets him to get stuck, and it just it doesn't link well enough. Like as a kid, I enjoyed watching it, but as an adult, I'm like, okay, I want it to have a couple more rewrites. Similarly.
Yeah, I have to wonder if the original intent of Diesel was to, you know, first show up and obviously antagonize Trevor and Edward about how no one would want to come to a party where there's just old steam engines. And then maybe he's the reason for Bertie being all, you know, braggadocious and arrogant with Trevor. Maybe Diesel gasses Bertie up a little bit. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because he would have been fun because he doesn't appear much in Series 3 at all. So,
he's got a few roles, but
right? Diesel does it again.
Nice to see how he would have been integrated.
Is his main one, right?
Yeah, they stick him in that. They obviously use him as the replacement for Daisy in Mavis, and I feel like I'm missing. Oh, I guess he's in Tender Engines later in season 3, but I think
but it's a very small role. Yeah. The
Very
writers,
small,
I think,
for sure,
they underutilized the diesel engines.
For sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, and especially as you get later into the seasons, you know, so many opportunities for characters like Boko or Daisy or even Derek. You know, some of the underused ones, they could have been integrated a lot better for sure. But yeah, that even stems back to this episode. If Diesel had been included, I think it could have been a whole different story.
Totally. Yeah. So that's the only thing that. You know, I mean, it didn't bother me as a kid, but now I'm just like, Just to move on to some trivia, I know I mentioned the kind of piece about the home music video. It's interesting that, yes, some of the footage from this episode was used in the George Carlin 2022 documentary, which I haven't seen, but I have queued. And I really want to check it out. It's a hefty one, but looks kind of interesting. I also have a kind of exciting thing in the future. For those who aren't aware, I'm doing a Shining Time Station prop display at the Greenberg Toy and Train Show in Edison, New Jersey on the November 26th and 27th weekend. And there will be a prop from this episode in the display. And I'm not going to say what it is at the moment, but it's something definitely fun, and I think will be surprising for folks to see. I will say I just, again, I love Schemer's whole little wacky, strawberry thing and his pie flinger. I love when he calls it, when the mayor's there and he's like, the pie flop dinger. And the mayor's like, what? And he's like, oh, pie flinger, I mean. It's so great. And then it's funny, Rick mentioned during one of my podcast reunions that Brian actually fell on a funny way on his ankle when he was in the strawberry costume. And I think you can see the take when he's going up the stairs and he falls on his ankle. When he's just the last time when he's exiting with Schemy, because they fall over several times. They roll down the stairs as strawberries and then try and climb back up. I don't know, maybe that I would love to dress as a strawberry costume for Halloween, but those strawberry costumes, because they have a little hat, with the leaves, the green leaves, and then the
little stem hat,
the little stem hat, and then like the red sweater and red pants with the big puffy strawberry. I feel like this episode just had a really wonderful blend of, Mr. C, Schemer's funny antics, a bit of conflict with the kids in the station, but nothing dire, a lovely little segue with JB King, and then a great finale of everyone going to the fair. And even though it sounds like a lot when I'm describing it, I think it actually melded very well together as a whole.
Yeah, it definitely does. And in rewatching it, there's a few things that kind of stick out to me. I always kind of preferred the Shining Time episodes where they had 2 Thomas stories, but I don't think I would want them to have 2 in this episode, because there's just so much happening in the station that I can't imagine cutting any of those bits out to make room for another Thomas story. So I think this is an instant where it's definitely one of the episodes where having only one Thomas story was not any sort of a hindrance. It carried itself well outside of that, for sure. And one of the things that strikes me, not just about this episode, but about season 2 as a whole, is the change they made to Mayor Flopdinger's character. Because in season 1, we see him in one episode, he's very gruff and very abrasive. And then, yeah, exactly. And then starting in, Tis a Gift, and then obviously continuing into the next 2 seasons, they've made him a lot more of a humorous character, which I think was a wonderful change.
Kind of goofy and absent-minded.
Yeah, and credit to Jerome Dempsey, because he does a wonderful job playing the part. But I love when he comes in and the kids are like, "Oh, hi, Mayor Flopdinger," and he goes, "Oh, well, that's easy for you to say. I have to judge a pie eating contest."
He's great. I love too when he tries Schemer's pie, like with the whipped cream and his fancy little spoon, and then spits it out into the pie.
Yeah.
It's so like, he's just like, it's so over the top.
Yeah.
Great use of the secondary characters in this episode, them coming out, and then the whole thing with Ginny and Midge. And I will say that Midge is a little sassy with the kids, especially when she's like, well, you better get your ducks in a row. And then they start, it's not Billy's fault, blah, blah, blah. But, she was going to the fair with her gherkins, and I guess it cramped her style. So she was like, screw this train station.
I really
taking
love
the
that
bus.
bit too, where she comes in and she offers Billy a pickle, and he goes, do you always travel with pickles, Midge?
Yes. And then she talks about using only one banana or something. And I always thought she was talking about the gherkins, but she's not. She's talking about something. Yeah. She's talking about her hat, I think. Or something else.
She's talking about food that she travels with.
That's it. Thank you. Yes, but I always was like, as a kid, I was like, people put bananas in gherkins? Maybe that's why I don't like them, because I never liked how they were sweet. I was always a dill pickle tangy guy myself.
Yeah.
So, but the other day I noticed, I was like, oh, that's not what that means. So, anyway, the little charming kids, misunderstandings. Anyway, any other thoughts before we move on to ratings?
I don't think I have any other thoughts other than it's such a beautiful episode to me. There's so many good things about this, and I will say in sort of a half trivia, half final thoughts moment here, if anyone watched this episode on something other than PBS, for example, if you watched it on the Fox Family Channel or Nick Jr. or something, I really recommend watching the full episode online because they cut so many things out of those different airings.
Oh, awful.
And it baffles me because, I mean, we think about, I saw that on the Nick Jr. airing, they cut out everything with J.B. King. And I can't picture this episode without Home or without that scene where he's talking about when he met Mr. Conductor as a kid. It just removes so much substance from it.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, that really dismayed me. I was like, cutting Home? I was like, that's the heart of the episode. How dare you?
Exactly.
Yeah, so go to Joseph's channel, Johnson and Naughty, and watch his version of All's Fair. It's full. It's the best quality you'll ever see it in for now. And likely for a long time, but I'd like to think that this reinvigorated interest in Shining Time will spread worldwide.
Yes.
In terms of ratings, I would have to give this a 9.5 out of 10. It's a very high rating. I was giving it a 9 before, and then I kept waffling between like 9.5 and 9, especially because of the Thomas story. But I really wanted to think, like, did that Thomas story bother me as a kid? No, I liked it. It fit in. It was like you said, slice of life, gentle, lulling. I think it was a good follow-up to the Railroad Cars Are Coming song. I feel like the show really hit it had hit its stride at this point. It was a well-oiled machine, and not just a machine, it had a lot of heart. And I feel like to be honest, if somebody asked me to send them one episode that really sums up at the heart of the show, it would be this one for me. I am that much of a fan. So much so that, this is really, really top tier for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I would give this one a 9 as well. Similar reasons. I mean, it's not the strongest Thomas story.
Yeah.
That certainly, could have been a little bit better, but all the same, not unpleasant by any means. And again, it's one of those episodes where you don't really need the Thomas episode included. There's the story of what's happening in the station itself and all the extra inclusions of the jukebox song and the picture machine song. It really carries itself. There's no need for, I mean, as much as we all want to see Thomas in this show and we want Mr. Conductor to come in and tell us a story, it's one of the instances where I could watch a cut of this where the Thomas story isn't included, and I would feel satisfied because it's just such a nice wrap-up episode.
It's very true. I think I would still miss Thomas a bit, but you're right. It could hold its own easily. And now we've come to the part of the show where I'm gonna ask Mike to say Edward, Trevor, and the Really Useful Party 5 times as fast as he can.
Oh Lord, I didn't know this was coming. Oh no. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna mentally prepare. Okay, deep breath. Here we go. Edward, Trevor, and the Really Useful Party. Edward, Trevor, and the Really Useful Party. Oh no, I can't do it.
You did it really well. That was an impressive 2 tries.
I got 2. I got 2 out of 5. That's not bad.
You did really well. Oh my god! Round of applause. Thank you. Oh, Mike, just nailed it again.
Oh, thank you. One of my many talents. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ken Bianco Jr. from Train World, where we have the greatest selection of model trains and train sets. We also are proud to carry Bachmann's full line of Thomas & Friends products. With a large variety of different brands and scales, we have the best items for your model train collection. You can find Train World on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can see our latest products and even be invited to all our events like Thomas Tuesdays. Visit trainworld.com today to find your next addition to your model railroad journey.
Honestly, it is so fun doing this with you, Mike. And I also want to just really thank our listeners for joining us along this sort of grand review of the whole series before we dive into kind of the nitty-gritty of each season. And I also wanted to say that, we're doing our favorites right now. So we have a lot of positive things to say about these episodes. We're not afraid to discuss criticism as you've seen, but we'll probably be doing more of that as we go into the episodes, some that we maybe don't like or don't land with us as much. So I just wanted to bring that in to balance that out.
Yes, absolutely.
So, final thoughts, Mike?
Well, once again, thank you to everyone for tuning in here. It's been a blast. It's so fun to do these as we're calling them, sort of taster episodes to go through each series of Shining Time and give you a bit of a taste of what we'd be talking about here. We've got a lot more to look forward to, for sure.
We absolutely do. We have season 3 in our next episode, so stay tuned for that. I always just have so much fun with you, Mike. So thanks again, and looking forward to our next episode.
Thank you, my friend. I can't wait. We're moving on to the big season 3.
Even more insanity and more heart. Don't worry.
Yes, plenty of heart.
Until next time, I've been Adrian.
And I have been Mike.
And we'll see you next time on Time to Shine. Bye.
Bye-bye.